The Tennessee Titans could have a top 10 offensive line this season. I'll tell you what it'll take to make it happen on today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We are continuing our positional preview series on today's show. We are going to talk about the offensive line. I'll tell you why the Titans can have a top 10 offensive line this year. We'll talk about some of the intriguing bubble options that could make the roster. And I'll tell you why one undrafted free agent longshot could make this team. Before I get into it, I do want to thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast. Speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. If you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one, especially with training camp less than 2 weeks away. Speaking of training camp, we've been doing our training camp preview series here, going through every single position. I talked about quarterback, tight end, running back, wide receiver already this week. If you missed those, make sure you check it out. We're going to do offensive line today, and then tomorrow we are going to move into the defense, and we'll hit the other defensive positions to finish out the week next week. You don't want to miss any of that. So the way that I've been doing this is I have the locks at each position, guys who are a lock to make the team. I have the bubble guys at each position, guys who are on that roster bubble. It could go either way. And then, of course, I have the long shots at the end who won't likely make the team, but hey, there's always a chance. So with all that being said, let's talk about this Tennessee Titans offensive line because, like I said, I think this offensive line has top 10 potential. Now, they would need everything to break right for that to be the case. But hey, sometimes you get lucky and everything breaks right. And I'll tell you, on the offensive line, things break right more often than not when you have Bill Callahan as your offensive line coach. So obviously have to start there, although it's not a player on the roster. The addition of Bill Callahan, as we have talked about throughout the offseason since he was added to this coaching staff, it's just absolutely paramount. You look at his multiple run scheme in Cleveland, zone runs, power runs, always getting the best out of his guys. This is just the most important addition that the Tennessee Titans have made on the offensive line may very well be Bill Callahan when we look back at things. But obviously number 2 on that list, if not number 1, is J.C. Latham. And I've talked about this recently. I've mentioned it online at Tic Tac Titans on Twitter. But tell me the last time a Tennessee Titans first-round pick had a better start to their career. Again, I know no games have been played, pads aren't on. We're just talking about off-season practices and things like that. But the leadership, the dedication, the skill set, getting praise from his coaches, showing personality early on that already has J.C. Latham as a fan favorite. I mean, it may not translate to on-field success, but you cannot tell me that a Tennessee Titan has had a better start as a first-rounder, rookie, has had a better start to their career through the first 3 months than J.C. Latham, at least not since I've been covering this team. That's certain. Since 2019, certainly. Jeffrey Simmons turned into a good player, but he missed the first 6 games of his career with an injury. So you can't count that. That can't beat what J.C. Latham has done. So very excited about J.C. Latham, and here's the reality. If Latham is as advertised, he could be a top 12, top 10 left tackle in the NFL, boom, from day one, immediately. And remember, the season is a long time. We go all the way from September to January, all right? Maybe Latham, who he is in week 1, is not who he is in week 6, moving forward. So if Latham is as advertised, that is the number 1 step in the Tennessee Titans being a top 10 offensive line. The next step on that would be the next step over. And it's Peter Skoronski ascending to become a top 10 guard in the NFL. And I think he absolutely has the ability to do it. We've seen him bulk up, obviously. And with Bill Callahan's tutelage, I just think that Peter Skoronski is set. I added him in my breakout candidates when we talked about that last week, because I just think Pete is about to go wild. What he did against Jacksonville in Week 18, if he can be better than that this year with Latham and Cushenberry next to him to help him, oh boy, we are looking at a freak offensive guard. So those two, obviously, and then Lloyd Cushenberry, who's been criminally underrated, probably because he put on a Titans jersey. You guys know how that goes, right? Obviously. So to me, Lloyd Cushenberry is one of the top 5-6 centers in the NFL. And he's just so much bigger and stronger than Aaron Brewer. I can't tell you how excited I am to watch him play. So those three guys could all be Pro Bowl level players on the left side of the offensive line. What an incredible start. You know what I mean? Like that is incredible. And from what we've been through the last few years, makes it even sweeter. You know what I mean? Now the right side, I will tell you, is up in the air. But to me, with Sadiq Charles leading the group at right guard, he's a lock to make the roster. Even if Sadiq Charles were to get passed on the depth chart, they're not going to cut him. You know what I mean? He's going to make the team. And then Nicholas Petit-Ferrer, to me, he's a guarantee to make the team as well. While he's been injured, he's still the favorite to land the right tackle spot. He still has a ton of experience starting in the NFL. 19 games, 18 games he started in his NFL career. He's clearly the favorite, and I don't think that there's any way that NPF doesn't make the roster. No matter what happens, whether he wins the right tackle spot or not, he's a lock to make the team. And I feel the same way about Dillon Radunz. So as you guys know, and I'm sure my everydayers will know, I am a Dillon Radunz fan. I have been since he was drafted, and I think him not fulfilling his potential honestly has as much, if not more, to do with the coaching staff jerking him around for 3 years. And then the ACL injury, of course. Like, I think Dillon Radunz in a different environment would have turned into a solidified starting guard in the NFL. And I still think that he is that right now. So even if he doesn't beat out Sadiq Charles, I think Dillon Radunz is a lock to make the team, because if NPF got hurt, he would immediately be one of the best tackles on the team. If Charles got hurt or Skoronski got hurt, he would immediately be the starting left guard. He's just good depth to have on this team. And I think he's proved it throughout his career. When he's asked to come in a pinch, he typically does a pretty good job. And that's why he's got so many fans in the Titans fan base, because people have seen Dillon Radunz answer the challenge, and he's been treated like a guy who hasn't. So even if he doesn't beat out Sadiq Charles for right guard, Dillon Radunz is a lock to make this team. Now, that's 6 offensive linemen that I have as a lock already. And I'll say this, Dillon Radunz as depth as your 6th best offensive lineman. Again, the Titans can be a top 10 offensive line because they actually have some good depth now as well. But the bubble conversation is very, very interesting, especially after the Titans added another offensive tackle within the last month. So let's talk about the bubble. Who could be cut? Who should the Titans keep? Oh, man, it's an interesting conversation. We'll get into that now. Before we do, though, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Look, I love Game Time. I purchased MLB tickets, NBA tickets, NFL tickets, WNBA tickets, concert tickets, all on Game Time. They literally have everything that you need. And it's summertime, folks. It is time to go out and check out an MLB game, okay? My Reds, up and down, but an exciting team nonetheless, with Ellie De La Cruz and Hunter Green. You guys don't want to hear more about the Reds, but I'm sure you have your own favorite baseball team. Go watch them play. Get your tickets on Game Time. You also get a view from your seat, all-in prices, Game Time's guarantee. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. Again, we are in the middle of our positional preview series as we head towards Tennessee Titans training camp in less than 2 weeks. Incredible. Again, it's funny. I was talking to some of my local friends, some of my buddies here. It smells like football out there. It feels like football out there today. A little bit of a cooler, overcast summer day where I'm at. Man, it's just got the vibes as high as possible for me. I've been watching film, getting ready for a Roger McCreary film breakdown on the film channel at Tic Tac Titans next week. I know you guys will like that. Football's right around the corner, folks. So make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast. And of course, we got the defense to talk about. So make sure that you tune in for that. But the bubble guys on the offensive line, we got to start with Daniel Brunskill. Is this the end for Daniel Brunskill with the Titans? Look, to me, the question becomes, what do the Titans want to do money-wise? So the Titans have about $23 million in cap space as things stand right now, and you don't want to use all of that. You know, it's not like a grocery store budget where you got $100, you're going to the grocery, you might as well get $100 worth of groceries. Like, this isn't a 1 week thing, like use all the money, stack out the team, and then we go into the season, it's ready to go. During the season, you're going to have to make signings. During the season, you're going to have to make moves. Also, what if a trade becomes available in the middle of the season and you need to have the cap space to be able to absorb the player that you're trading for? You need to have, and worth noting, if you did not know this, you can roll over cap space in the NFL. So like rollover minutes for your old cell phone plan. You know, you can do that in the NFL. John Robinson rolled over like $40 million one time at the beginning of his tenure as general manager because the Titans didn't have anyone to pay and they didn't, have big contracts. So you can roll over the money and use it for next year's free agency. All the in-season moves that you may need to make. Just because the Titans have $23 million in salary cap doesn't mean they need to spend it all. But if they wanted to save some money, if they wanted to add $2-3 million to their cap space because they wanted to make a move or they needed a little extra room, Daniel Brunskill is the number one guy that I would say should be cut. He's going to be the most value in terms of cutting him, and he's not even a top 6 offensive lineman within this scheme. Look, Daniel Brunskill is a smaller guard. He's only about 300 pounds. He's 6'5", but he's only about 300 pounds. Where Sadiq Charles is 320, and Dylan Radin's bulked up. He's like 315, 317. So Brunskill is just significantly smaller, and I don't think he fits the power offensive lineman mold that Bill Callahan and the Titans are looking for now. That has resulted in him being demoted to backup center. He was a starting right guard last year. Now he's not even one of the top 2 guards. You have Sadiq Charles at the top and Dylan Radins as the backup. So they've been using Brunskill as the backup center. And the Titans, again, if they want that extra money, if they have a big move, someone say Justin Simmons, if they have a big move and they need that extra money, then go ahead and cut Daniel Brunskill. But let me say this. There is no other good backup center on the Titans right now. There is no clear and obvious backup center on the Titans. That's why Daniel Brunskill was asked to move there, because they simply don't have anybody. All right. They had a younger player, Xavier Jaelyn or whatever, and he's put on IR now. He was a backup center, but let's be real. He was never making this team. And that was, low end of the 90-man roster. So the Titans have a decision. If they need Daniel Brunskill's money, then by all means, cut him. Find a cheaper backup center option, which they certainly could find. Brunskill's going to cost like $3 million this year. They could find somebody cheaper to be a backup center. Like, no big deal. But if you want to have the depth, if you want to have the best depth possible, having a starting level, a low-level starter in Daniel Brunskill as your secondary backup, he would be the third guard and the second center. That is incredible depth. When you have a starting level player, even though it's low level, you have a starting level player as your 7th offensive lineman. That's big. So he's on the bubble. All right, he's on the bubble, and what the Titans do at other positions probably will inform how they treat Daniel Brunskill, but I still think Daniel Brunskill would be great depth. But if I had to mention a cut candidate, which I did last week, it's definitely Daniel Brunskill at the top. Now, The other guys are all offensive tackles in the bubble range. You have Jaron Christian, who the Titans just signed. You have Leroy Watson, who the Titans traded a 7th-round pick for. Both of those guys played with Bill Callahan in Cleveland last year, so familiarity there. But both of those guys are offensive tackles, okay? And we talked about the top 6. Radens can play some tackle, but there's Latham and NPF, and that's it. So if you have Radens and Brunskill as your 6 and your 7, you have to keep one of these tackles. All right, Watson or Christian. And honestly, this is where we have talked about the roster math throughout the week. Keeping only 2 quarterbacks, keeping only 3 tight ends, keeping only 6 wide receivers, keeping only, 3 or 4 running backs. I want 4 running backs there. That's where I would have that math. And then that would allow you to keep 9 offensive linemen. I think with the Titans' offensive line issues they've had in recent years, they need to be keeping 9 offensive linemen. So what I would do if I were the Titans, I would keep Radens and Brunskill, and then I would keep Watson and Christian. And then I would have 9 offensive linemen on the roster. That's what I would do. But that leaves one bubble man out, and that's Jaelyn Duncan. Look, I've said this. I'm going to repeat it because people don't like when I'm negative about draft picks, whether it's T'Vondre Sweat or Des Fitzpatrick or Monty Rice or whoever. When I don't like a draft pick, people don't like that. They would prefer that I be positive rather than tell the truth. But I told the truth when Jaelyn Duncan was picked, and it may be a 6th-round pick, and a lot of people say to me, Tyler, it's a 6th-round pick. How could you hate a 6th-round pick? How could it be a bad pick at that point? Blah, 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 blah. Also worth noting that a lot of people had Jaelyn Duncan in their top 100 prospects when he came out in the draft. So how can you say somebody who was ranked in the top 100 by certain scouts is a bad pick in the 6th round? Well, here's what I would tell you. Because I never trusted Jaelyn Duncan's work ethic. I never trusted him to be a guy who's grinding to get better. And that's why a top 100 talent dropped to the 6th round. That's why. Because people don't trust him to be a hard worker. And at the end of the day, I did not think that Jaelyn Duncan would make the team last year. He did. All right. But I got to tell you, I think that was a 1-year deal because the Titans had a terrible offensive line. And most offensive lines around the NFL, Jaelyn Duncan would not have made the team. So I just got to say I've been out on Duncan all along. And the Titans have added J.C. Latham. They've added Jaron Christian. They've added Leroy Watson. Doesn't look like they believe in Jaelyn Duncan either. So I'm just letting you guys know he may be on the bubble because he was on the team last year and he had experience. But I don't think Jaelyn Duncan is making this team. He'd be a great practice squad option, but I got a feeling somebody will probably pick him up off waivers when the Titans let him go. But that's the bubble. Who do you guys think is going to make this team? There is one long shot who I think does have a shot, and I'll tell you who that is next. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast, breaking down the offensive line group in our positional preview series before we get to Tennessee Titans training camp in less than 2 weeks. Tomorrow, we're going to start defense. Next week, we're going to do all defense, and that's going to lead up to my 53-man roster predictions. The first 2 episodes of not next week, but the week after, which is training camp week. Oh, man, it's crazy. Crazy that it's right here. But before we get into my long shots on the offensive line, do want to thank you for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Also want to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. It's here on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV. It's called Locked On Sports Today. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day. You get insight from local experts, from Locked On hosts. You get coverage of every league from our national shows. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app and, of course, here on YouTube. But with that being said, my long shots to make the team, John Ojukwu. All right, he's been getting first team reps in summer practices because NPF and Jaelyn Duncan are hurt. I think that's why they brought in Jerron Christian, though, because either they can put Jerron Christian there if NPF still isn't ready, or they can move Leroy Watson there and then have Jerron Christian back up at left tackle. That's why I think they did this. It wasn't necessarily because NPF isn't good enough, but NPF is hurt, and that factors in. I think the reality is Jaelyn Duncan has been hurt, and they're not high on Jaelyn Duncan anyway. John Ojukwu isn't good enough. He's a practice squad level guy. So I think that's why Jerron Christian was brought in, because they didn't feel comfortable with John Ojukwu after watching him during summer practices. So to me, John Ojukwu is a long shot, and I think he's bound for the practice squad, quite honestly. You also have Andrew Rupcich, who started some games for the Titans at guard last year. I think he's another guy who's just a practice squad level player. He's not better than Brunskill. He's not better than Radens. So there's really no spot for him as an interior guy, as a swing guy. I think Ojukwu and Rupcich would be awesome on the practice squad. That would be fantastic. And then the guy who's the long shot that I think can make it, and it's Cole Spencer out of Texas Tech. 6'5", big-bodied guard. So Cole Spencer was injured last year, but the Titans were very interested in him. I think it was Justin Mella who reported that the Titans spent 2 hours. Bill Callahan spent 2 hours with Cole Spencer breaking down film. They met with him multiple times at multiple, like, combine, pro day, private visit. Like, they met with Cole Spencer a ton. So the Titans were significantly interested in Cole Spencer. And then they bring him in as an undrafted free agent, which to me tells me that Cole Spencer picked the Titans as well. There is a connection there, okay? And Cole Spencer has been a guard for most of his career. I think he played a little bit of tackle early in his career, but he's been a guard. But I think that Cole Spencer could even be the Titans' backup center. And this is where we go back to the Daniel Brunskill conversation. If the Titans want to save $2 to $3 million on Daniel Brunskill, then you cut him, and you could have a guy like Cole Spencer as your backup center. Now, that becomes tough because he's an undrafted free agent rookie. Can you count on him? You would really give up Daniel Brunskill to keep Cole Spencer, John Ojukwu, Andrew Rupcich, Jaelyn Duncan. You're taking Cole Spencer over all those guys. But to me, Cole Spencer is a guy the Titans can develop to be one of their top interior backups. And the reality here is Dylan Radens, last year of his contract. Daniel Brunskill, last year of his contract. Sadiq Charles, 1-year contract. Like, the Titans don't have future depth on the offensive line. And getting an undrafted free agent like Cole Spencer would allow them to have some youth in the pipeline to develop. So I think that would be absolutely critical. Again, it's a long shot. That's why he's in the long shots. But I think there is a chance. And when the pads come on, he's going to have to prove it. But last two names I want to mention here, Latavius Simmons and Brian Dooley. Simmons is kind of a versatile offensive lineman, can play inside, can play outside. Dooley is an offensive tackle. Look, both of those guys, I thought they were creative players for a minute. Shout out to them. They're on NFL roster right now. But Latavius Simmons and Brian Dooley are not making the Titans. They are there for training camp purposes, camp bodies, as we would call it. And hey, if you were Latavius Simmons or Brian Dooley or his family listening to this, and you heard me call them camp bodies, you probably would not like that very much. And I recognize that. But the truth is the truth. And they're camp bodies who aren't making the team. So let's just call it what it is. I don't want to have a lot of conversations about Latavius Simmons and Brian Dooley. Just doesn't really serve anybody. They're not going to be on this football team when it really matters. So take that for what it's worth. That's just the honest truth. And sorry if you're close to one of them listening. I hate to be rude, but sometimes the truth is rude, and that's just the reality of life. But with that being said, that is going to do it for me today, folks. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.